booktube, and welcome back to the library tour of Doom, a bookish eternity being inflicted on you by Lord Ganesha and myself, in which we go through every book in my library, book by book, a library tour that is not bookcase by bookcase or shelf by shelf or category by category, but individual book by individual book, and you just know, despite the heroic self-control I've been exercising, you just know these videos are eventually going to grow to 30 minutes apiece. 30 minutes per book. I don't know if that'll happen. We shall see. Certainly every book has that kind of a story. Now, that includes today's book. We're going with a gem from 1924 today. This is The Sprite, the story of a red fox. This is by Ernest Harold Baines, who was a great conservationist during the beginning part of the 20th century. An eccentric by anybody's measure, but with a wonderful understanding of animals and an urgent eloquence for their preservation. At a time when America was not being mindful of that, he was a foremost voice, for instance, in saying what seemed unthinkable, which is that if we don't take strident measures to preserve the American bison, it will go extinct. And we will regret that. And so will our children and our grandchildren. So we should take those measures. Same thing with exotic birds, songbirds, pretty birds with plumage of any kind. They were being decimated by casual fashion, by casual hunters. And he raised the alarm that that should be stopped, that we should stop doing that. And he had a knack for telling animal stories in a delightful way. And that's what this book is, because this is a story of a red fox. Just Canis vulpus. It just wasn't domesticated. He didn't find a puppy on the side of the road or anything like that. It just adopted him and started sharing adventures with him. It's a beautiful thing. This book is full of beautiful black and white photos. There's the kit in a shoe, and the fox, the sprite, remained wild the whole time that they knew each other. There he is, still as a statue in these beautiful black and white photos. And this is this is a little envelope from the secondhand book that I got. A tiny little note. Dear Connie, how stupid of me. Of course Marianne doesn't want a Patty's battered old book, so here's the fresh copy for her, with hopes that she too loves the Sprite. Okay, so Mrs. William Sexton of Lancaster, Massachusetts, in 1940, decided to make good on this volume rather than hand off one that had been destroyed. Would that all book borrowers were like that. This thing came from the book stall on 165 High Street in Clinton, Massachusetts. Now, I'm going to assume, I don't know if any of you live near Clinton, Massachusetts, I'm going to assume that 165 High Street is still there, but that it's not a bookstore anymore, that the book stall is long gone. I'm going to assume that. I will never be to, oh, look at that, how beautiful. I will never be to Clinton, Massachusetts again. But this is just every anecdote connected with this fox that happened to start frequenting his home and getting to know him and letting him get to know the fox. And it's delightful. Absolutely delightful. I have probably, if I were to assemble them like a normal book person, I would have a whole bookcase of natural history books much like this. And this would take pride of place. It was full of wonderful stories, including one that he tells of how his neighbors were naturally, out there in the quasi-countryside, they were naturally wary. This was a time when everyone's dogs were out, when everyone's cats were roaming around, when everyone had chicken coops. And they were naturally worried at having a fox suddenly become so welcome in the neighborhood. You know, surely this would be a marauder. And he made a typical bargain with everybody in his neighborhood. He was hard to refuse and hard to dislike. That he would pay for any damages that were done by foxes, even if it couldn't be proven that it was his fox, provided everybody in the neighborhood agreed not to shoot. Don't shoot. Don't kill a fox that you happen to see. Instead, just present me with the bill, and that'll be fine, and we will be fine. And they all agreed. All of his neighbors agreed, and as he put it over and over again in person-to-person communication, and also in this book, he never got a bill. No one ever presented him. There were depredations, of course. Probably his fox was guilty for a lot of them, but no one ever asked him to make good on a lost chicken or a damaged piece of fencing or whatever. Now, the story that he puts it is that the only person who ever asked anything of him was one woman who asked for a photo. And he said that she kept photos of all the local wildlife, the stray dogs, the foxes, whatnot, all in one room as like a police rogues gallery. But that's all. That's the only thing that anybody wanted, was that one photo. And when the time comes, the Sprite leaves as mysteriously as he came. So it's just a delightful story. Long since out of print. Everything that this author did is long since out of print. He wrote probably half a dozen books, or maybe even a dozen books, and they're delightful. If you see them used, make a note of this author's name, because he is delightful company on the page, even though he could have weird blind spots. He had one particular weird blind spot when it came to animals that I find unforgivable. I'm willing to take the rest of his books on balance for how wonderful they are, but he used his considerable public cachet to say that vivisection was no big deal, and that the animals who suffered it really weren't in all that much pain. Inconceivable to me that he could have that opinion of the kinds of people that he knew so well. But he went public with it anyway. But aside from that, not everybody's perfect, except me. But it certainly, as an author, he did no wrong. So I highly recommend The Sprite, The Story of a Fox, if you can find it. I don't know if you can, but maybe the bookstall is still in Clinton, Massachusetts. Maybe that would be a place to look. I really doubt that it's still there. I'm not going to Google it. I don't want to know. I prefer to live in the past, where the woman who wrote that note just went to the shop and got a copy because she couldn't, in all good consciousness, hand back a ratty copy to a friend. So anyway, that's your library tour of doom for today. Who knows what tomorrow will bring? We shall see. Thank you, BookTube.